Hey, Ike here. This is Draw Process, and we're on page 16 of First Sun and Sword. We're going to be in the throne room of King Croc, and as usual, I'll talk about my process, techniques, and mindset while you see me draw the page.
This is the thumbnail for the page. There's a couple little drawings on the side. One is a top-down view of what I'm thinking for this throne room. That's the bottom large panel there. And then the other is the design of this character where she has these, surgically implanted bumps to look more crocodile-like. So she serves King Croc and for some reason is taking on those characteristics. And now, drawing the page, quickly getting those panel borders in. I use a 0.8 micron for the borders and an 0.5 for the inks. My pencil here is, so sorry, some of the pencils just got missed here. I just lost that chunk of video somehow. I think I'm penciling with an, well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I switched pencils. So typically I just pencil with, what is it, an H? But I may have started with a 5H this time for the just layout, the initial grid lines and structure of like the space, and then maybe switched to the H once I was more sure of that, so that I don't get too much lead on the page. I think that's often overlooked by artists, especially if they're newer, is when your pencils have a certain quality to them, to consider how your tools are a part of that quality you're getting. So try different pencils, try different sharp, making sure they're sharp or using mechanical or whatever. And different paper can affect it too, but I typically just stick with Bristol board for comic books, 11 by 17 inches. So you'll see here laying out the perspective. So what we have here is the throne room of King Croc. It's possibly new construction, or at least adjusted. I wanted it to feel like a layer, like a den, and almost like a mythical den of a beast. So very large cut stone blocks. And so it's going to have a really like grid-like look to it. And I don't typically do really symmetrical designs, really. I like more of an organic feel. It's easier for me to draw loosely without having to plan it all out. Because if you got a more strict design, or it'll even happen if you're doing something in a style like it's sci-fi, it's in the future, or something it's in the city, urban, modern, and it needs like really straight lines. I like to eyeball things and go with a loose line, and that might not look right. It might not fit the style of that place. Anyways, that's a tangent. So laying out the place, what we have here is this, what looks kind of like an altar, but it's just a cubby where King Croc lays down, dwells in that cubby. And on top of it is a throne chair for a human, basically. It's more human-sized. He can't even sit on it. So he is in the seat of power of this city, but he can't even sit in the chair. And he just has it there as some kind of totem, emblem of his power. I like the imagery of that. So I pull from my imagination, from my experience, my background, and really do try to make things interesting and meaningful, and not just okay, there's a boss in the boss room, but to have things have more meaning, especially because this is a comic, it's a visual. So do the visuals, are they on purpose, right? Do they serve a storytelling purpose? Or are you saying something with it? So you have these lizard men that have taken over the seats of power and society's crumbling around them, but they're able to control things from their position using force and fear and gold, or I guess whatever resource, and to have a lot of soldiers, a lot of people, mercenaries that work for them just for the money, just for this position, as the world crumbles around them, and that's who this woman is. I believe her name is Denise. So that'll be interesting to see. She has a background with sword before these days, serving King Croc. I'll mention too, King Croc is not the ultimate villain of this world, this story. That the Lizard King, the Emperor, is at the capital of one nation, so to speak. But he has an empire that even covers to this edge, the city, that's on the outskirts here. And there's different lizard men that rule at different cities, and that's something you'll find out as we go. Yeah, people, without me telling you there, you might not know that exactly, but it'll become clear even in this story that this isn't the real Lizard Emperor. This is just one lizard ruler in one area, and he happens to have some power. So this will be their first encounter with the forces that stand against them. Denise crouching here. I left her hood up. I'm not going to fully reveal what she looks like yet, but you can tell that she is a woman, and that there's adjustments to her face. These bumps that are installed under the skin to give her a more reptilian look, and she's wearing a mask that sort of has teeth on it and like a lizard snout. So she wears that as well in this role. And she's dressed a lot like the soldiers of the town are. Throwing in the guards there behind her as she's come into the throne room. So start your scene, come in. They say come in late and leave early. You've got to be able to communicate what's happening, but I think that's good advice. And that's typically more from film advice, but a lot of things for film are going to apply to comics, so it doesn't hurt to read and listen to people that are teaching how to tell good stories for film, how to direct. And that was more my background before I got into comics, was taking college classes, working on student films. She's already kneeling down in the room. But then we see behind her, we realize the doors are open. She's come in from outside through those doors to this position. So, everything's making sense as you go. It's giving those little cues of the meaning of things. And if you do that really well, it just flows naturally. The reader can just be along with you. And if you push it too far, they might get confused, and that's not always a bad thing, but typically it's not something you want to do. I had read somewhere that ancient Egyptians even had natural gas lanterns, basically, that I guess were run by pipes or channels through the walls. That was pretty amazing to hear. Maybe that's the idea here. There's these bowls of oil, and they could just be filled periodically, or maybe they run through the walls. It's just fun. But I threw that in as the light source. There's no windows in this space. I didn't mention also on either side of where King Croc is in that little den, there's a little opening. It's a trench. It's an opening that runs to the river outside of this fortress. So there's a tunnel that runs right into his throne room, so he can enter and exit that way. And he's pretty confident, that technically would be a weak point of the security of his fortress, but he doesn't think anyone would ever want to enter that way. Because who wants to go underwater with a giant crocodile? So, those are things to those little details bring your world to life. Make it a little more interesting. Here she's bowing, and I struggled with that leg quite a bit. Like it's like just a dead-on figure like that. I don't typically do that. I don't like people just staring at the camera. And to show that stance in a way that really communicates how her body's positioned there, when there's such foreshortening on that and such a flat line on the leg there. So got it to a position I was happy with after a few tries. For me, I can't just draw like a skeleton structure of a figure, lines and circles to build your character. I can't just do that and then draw a figure over it. If I do that, I can't tell that the pose is gonna look good until I see it with flesh on it. So I've developed my way of doing things, which is to kind of flesh it out and then move things around. So I basically end up redrawing entire parts of the drawing, because I'm going to kind of capture the fleshing out the leg and then moving the entire leg instead of just adjusting the skeleton or the underdrawing. So that's what works for me. I feel like it does add life to the drawings. That if I just start with that underdrawing structure, those lines and circles of the figure, that they can be rigid or static, because you're forcing this person, once you're starting to add the flesh and bring them to life, you're forcing them onto a structure that might not be the best for the emotions they're having, the expression, just what comes to life as you're drawing. So it feels more lively. I don't know if I can explain that really well, but to be able to make more lively characters by fleshing them out more and not just going off of an understructure. Trying to capture a few folds in their cloaks and get these guys positioned in their capes. It's kind of nice that in my world there's a lot of capes and cloaks, because I don't have to draw underneath them. Like I considered having those figures like standing sideways where you could see a profile view of them. You could see more of their figure. But then when I drew it on the page, I decided to just have their back to you, to the camera, because why not? Why not just pose them that way and not have to draw behind the cape? Okay. So here's a pretty small drawing, and it's got background in it. It has details. I mean, there's multiple figures. There's multiple background elements that I want to get right. Now, this is one of the big challenges, things to figure out when it comes to drawing comic book pages, is when it gets that small and when there's foreground, middle ground, background. I could have, inside that doorway, you may have noticed it was just blank. I didn't bother drawing outside of the throne room, even though there is an outside, a courtyard that you'd be able to see there. I didn't bother drawing any details to it because it would just be too many layers deep, that the details could not be seen. And even if I used a finer pen and I added all that detail in, it's just going to take longer for the person to read the image. To read something quickly, we see figure and background. And if you've got a figure on a background and then another figure on another background, like as another layer deep to the image, then it can't be read quickly. So yeah, figuring out how much detail to add, and how to simplify the details. Like the door had these two simple shapes that kind of look like crocodiles on them, and if I were to design this door, I might have made for a close-up image, I might have made really detailed and ornate shapes to those. But because I knew they were going to be so small on the page, I went with a really simple geometric shape. That's adjusting my design for the drawing, but sometimes you're stuck with the design and you just have to simplify it and shrink it down. And how to do that, how to imply the complexity through just a few lines, is something to learn for sure. And yeah, we're already inking it in. So the light sources here are the fire bowls of oil there, lining the wall. I put all those right on the horizon line, like again, making my life easy. By lining all of them up on the horizon, it's just a little less work. It's a little easier to position them. Same thing with the design for this. I originally thought I would do more of a curved wall to ceiling, and I decided to just do a much straighter edge to everything and keep the walls with simple blocks with just a simple divider in between. It's a pretty simple layout, and that is to make it easier to draw, because I know that I'm going to be in this throne room later, and I'm going to have to draw it again and again and again from different angles. And I might as well make it a little easier to draw, but still interesting. So that's where design comes in, and not just drawing skill. Something interesting with the den that I didn't mention yet, with the throne room here, there's a sunken part of the floor that's just a little inset, and it's got chains attached to the ground there, and like some piles of blood and bones. It's like a disgusting feeding floor, but that's right in front of the throne room. It's another imagery of what's wrong with this picture of this being the person in charge, that he's not on the throne, that he's in this den, and then right in front of him, when you walk in to see him, what you see is a feeding floor, and it probably stinks in there. It's disgusting. So the light sources are these oil lanterns, and then the doors that are open being another source. So they're lit from behind as they enter here. I kept the shadows really simple, even though it probably would be very dark in there, because the walls are so simple. The design is so simple and straight. There's not a lot of cubbies for shadows to go in. Sometimes that helps in a design to make it a little more complicated. And like those beams that are in between the blocks, they could have stuck out more and created opportunities for shadow to add some depth and weight. But I chose not to do that here. So there's not a lot of shadow in this room, even though it's probably rather dark in there. And I came in here and I adjusted the shadows on these guys. I realized that it would look better if their shadows stretched out further, and that would actually be more realistic to the light source. So I don't always stick to reality. I don't at all when it comes to where shadows go, but they need to feel real. So it actually just looked better to lengthen their shadows. But I only did that because I thought it looked better, not because it's more accurate, even though it probably is. And cleaning up the image, I just run this rubber eraser over everything and wipe away the shedding there. Going in with my white paint brush pen and just cleaning up a few spots. Luckily not really making any big changes here, but just just adding a little bit of clearer white edge to things, or hitting a corner of a panel border that was drawn a little too far, or lines that overlap that I can just kind of erase, white out that little chunk. So that works well for me, but I think any whiteout would work fine. And there's the finished page. That is the biggest, interior scene we've seen yet, interior space. I think it really hits the spot to we started off with that big, the giant bug in the desert and tried to hit people with a good, strong image there. And then when we got in the city, we saw them approaching, on the boat going up the stream, and that really brought the world to life. And I feel like this was that next really important image that brings the world to life, and it starts to it really hones in the story, because this is our opponent, villain for this episode, and this is going to be an important space later. So there's pages that in some sense they're the beats. They're sort of the beats in between those important moments. And when I hit those important moments, I like to recognize what I want to make that important moment, and then let it shine, let it take up a large chunk of the page. It functions like a breather too, and it like the dessert every now and then. And remember, these pages get posted on Sunday, so in a week you'll see the next page, and you can read and catch up on this comic or any of my other ones. The link's in the description for that. So next week. See ya.